If you're old enough to remember when phones had cords and the only thing that went viral was a cold, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Big 6-0 with Kaylee Harris and Guy Rawlinson. Because who better to discuss life's second act than two people who still think mature is a type of cheese?
Welcome again to the Big 6-0, the podcast where we prove that 60 is the new 40, except now we probably need reading glasses. I'm Guy Rawlinson, and joining me is my good friend from primary school and someone who used to rock pigtails and bobbles and probably barter scouts, the wonderful Kaylee Harris. Hey, Kaylee.
G'day, Guy. How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
If you're new to the podcast, Guy and I went to primary school together in Sydney. Our very first podcast was about those school days, including some of the games that we played. I remember in the first episode we spoke about jacks and KP and stuff like that. But this podcast, we want to talk about play in general when we were kids. We made our own games, didn't we?
We played up a lot.
We did.
But so I guess that comes under the sort of made up our own games. But there were a lot of sort of games, those outside games that we'd play that, you know, it sort of taught social skills and things like that, as far as being able to interact with other kids and just have a lot of fun in general, really, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of my earliest memories of play was I was born in Brisbane, and we lived in a Queenslander, one of those houses that's up on stilts. And so you had all the underneath the house area. And it was fantastic because the boy next door and I used to get our little Matchbox cars, and we'd build virtual cities underneath the house in the dirt, and we would drive our Matchbox cars through these little dirt tunnels and stuff like that. And getting a new Matchbox car, if you were ever fortunate enough to get one once every few weeks, it was just like a new little treasure in its box, and you didn't want to get it dirty. And that's one of my earliest memories of play.
Yeah, I used to do the same thing in our house. Our house was built up as well, and you'd go into the house and make roads, and I virtually did the same sort of thing, and you know, it didn't matter. You'd probably lose a car or two along the way, but I've still got some of those cars. You know, it's tucked away in a box, and you know, and that was just so much fun. But your imagination used to go sort of often on tangent, didn't it? You know, whether it was playing cars or, you know, or whatever it was.
And I think that's the thing that we benefited from not having, you know, the technology that's available to kids these days, is that, you know, we made our own fun, but there were plenty of times we were bored, but that was often when you sort of got the most benefit out of play, was when you were bored, right? You would find things to do, whether it was going down to the local creek and finding guppies or yabbies or whatever, and just exploring with the other kids in the neighborhood. They were like your best friends.
Yeah, and it was in a time when you knew all the kids in the street, and you'd walk to their house, or, you know, or if mum made you, you'd have to ring someone up and say, oh, do you want to come around and play? Because you'd get home from school, or it was a weekend, and it was always a case of, like, if the sun's shining, go outside and play.
Yeah.
And so you did, either had to make your friends or make your own games, or just come up with something, because, you know, otherwise you're kicking stones and, you know, you're going crazy as a 10-year-old probably.
Yeah, and I think I have one memory in Brisbane. I would have been about 5. And there was 3 kids next door. There was Diane, Michael, and John, and I had my sister as well. But and a few other neighbourhood ring-in kids came over to Michael and John, Diane's house one day, and we were all playing doctors and nurses. Now, I'm not going to say too much more about that, but
yeah,
I mean, I think about that now, and I think, how did we come up with that idea? To how did we justify that to ourselves, that was even a game?
Don't go there. I know you've already gone there, but been there, done that. And I don't know how that came about. Like, all of a sudden, I don't know, that whole doctors and nurses thing. Yeah, because it's not like we were subject to sort of, you know,
I mean, nothing bad happened. If I can just preface by
Mm,
saying nothing
mm,
bad happened,
mm,
but it was the whoever was playing the doctor would come over and poke you in the stomach and go, "Does
mm.
this hurt? Does this hurt?" And you go, "Ouch!" And it was like a
Yeah,
legitimate game. It wasn't anything rude or anything.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But how we came up with that concept,
I know. And I was mentioning your social skills. There was a game we used to play as a kid called Sardines. I don't know if you remember that
I never
game.
heard of that one. What was that?
Think sort of hide and seek, but you might have, and we were fortunate in the street we were in. We had probably, there was 6 kids next door, like, and there were 2 kids next door to them, and there was a kid across the road, and so we had kids on tap, and Sardines was essentially you'd play hide and seek, and there was one person that would go and look for everyone, but when you found that person, they went and hid with someone else. So eventually, everyone was hiding in the one spot, and that person that was looking for them actually had to find everyone. But it was,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there's just stuff that we made up, right?
yeah, that's right. Like you'd have some kid behind a bush and some kid behind a gate, and Kaylee was looking for you, and while Kaylee wasn't looking, you'd go and hide with that kid that's behind the gate. So it was all, but it was just stuff that was made up, and we called it
Yeah,
sardines because eventually all these kids were hiding in this one place,
yeah,
but I don't know where that come from. So
yeah.
it was just one of those things. Or is there
It,
anything that you remember making up or playing that you think, geez,
I've just no, not that I can remember making up so much. I think it's you just when you were talking about chasings and tag, and it's got different names depending on which state you grew up in, right? It was
mm.
either chasings or tag. It had other names as well. Like what other?
So long as it wasn't like boys' germs, no
Yeah, well, there
returns,
was
or
that as well.
yeah,
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 there was
okay,
that as
yeah,
well. And if you weren't
yeah,
fortunate enough to have a pool, and we weren't, I never had a pool growing up. We weren't rich enough. Only rich kids had that. Nobody in our street had a pool. You make did with a slip and slide.
oh, how good were they?
Bit of
Yeah,
plastic, a bit of mum's
yeah,
palm olive detergent, throw it on there,
yeah,
and you'd go whizzing off the end.
yeah. Or like I did once, and I, yeah, I got a bit of a paddling from Dad, I think, because we had a reasonably big backyard, and I thought it was a great idea not to worry about the plastic, but just to put the hose down and just
Yeah.
slide along the grass. And so there was just this long track all the way down that was just mud. And I thought, oh, and Dad loved his lawn, and I didn't see anything too wrong with it because it was a lot of fun. But
Exactly.
yeah, I found
Yeah.
out real
Mud.
quick.
How good was mud when you
I
were a
I
kid?
know, I know. But
Mud pies.
what about at school? What were the games at school that you sort of like playing?
Well, we talked about elastics, which
Mm,
I kind of remember doing something with elastics and with the girls, and but yeah, KP, which was essentially just handball. You talked about
mm.
in an earlier episode about British Bulldog,
Yeah,
which
uh,
I do remember.
yeah. Like that was just a license to you know. I guess they all had different names,
Mm,
but you have like kids on either side of the oval and some kid in the middle, and it was like bull rush. It was like it
yeah,
was just everyone would run at this kid, and this kid would tackle someone, and eventually there'd be like 10 kids in the middle and like 2 kids either side that just knew they were going to get an absolute pummeling
yeah,
because there were 10 kids that were ready to jump on you. But that, and like forcings back where you just either throw a ball or kick a ball either side and see
yeah.
how far you could kick the damn football. All those things that aren't organized, but someone's come up with it, and it kept you occupied for
Hours.
hours.
And do you remember like hide and seek? I can remember being anxious with hide and seek because it'd be okay. You've got to. There'll be someone there who's going. I'm going to count to 10. You've got till I count to 10 to go hide, and the
Mm.
anxiety associated with where can I hide, and you just get really stressed out.
There was a thing at school, and I think I might be the only person that remembered this. If sport wasn't on,
Mm,
and your heart sank, I mean, if you like playing sport, and they had this thing called tabloids. And I don't know if you remember that.
never heard of that. Well, what is that?
No, I must be the only person on the face of the planet that still remembers it. Tabloids was basically they'd set up little stations around the playground because you weren't allowed to go on the oval, and it'd be like individual little games that you would play. So it might be you got your little sack of beans or something, and you'd throw it into a hole or something. Or then the next thing would
Mm.
be like hula hoops, where you would be doing something, but they called it tabloid.
Tabloids. I wonder where that
Yeah,
came from.
I got no idea. Is this teachers making up a name? But you'd go from station to station to station, and everyone
Mm.
would be 10 minutes, and then you'd move on to the next thing. But
Yeah.
I hated it. I hated it. It wasn't real sport. It was just, how are we going to keep the kids occupied for an hour and a half of an afternoon?
Yeah. Which as parents now we understand, don't we? Like, how do I keep those kids occupied for the next
100%,
hour?
100%. But one
Yeah.
thing I
And
really loved was
yeah.
marbles. I don't know whether you got into marbles.
Oh, I loved
Oh,
marbles. I was captivated by some of the marbles and the colours
oh,
in the marbles. And you had the bigger sort of jumbo sized ones, and you had the little ones. But how they used to get those colours into the marbles, I couldn't stop
oh,
looking at
yeah,
them.
cat's eyes and all those sort of things. Yeah,
Cat's
yeah.
eyes, yeah.
And like you had the what they called tombolas or something, and like you had the really big ones, and then you had
Yeah.
the ball bearings, which apparently were the ants pants of, and it was,
Yeah.
if you got trapped down to the little gutter part of the school where someone, and you had to, hit their marble 3 times and then you won it. But everyone had their little
Yeah, yeah,
bag of
yeah.
marbles, and you think, oh man,
Oh my gosh, it was so
I know, but how
simplistic,
much fun was it,
wasn't
you
it?
know?
Oh, it was fantastic. The other game I remember is, and this, we talked earlier about playing with our Matchbox cars and trucks and stuff, but for a girl, playing with your dolls and playing, like husband and wives and stuff with your dolls. I had a Barbie, but I never had a Ken doll. I for some reason, I wanted a G.I. Joe. It was all comes back to me liking men in uniform again. But I had this G.I. Joe, and G.I. Joe and Barbie had a thing. Very innocent thing, but I used to make them kiss, and I used to call it kissy darlings. So I'd go, well, come on, like Barbie, you've got to give Joe a kiss, and they'd go, and they'd have little kissy darlings. It was all very naughty, but it's so innocent, right? So, and then I'd maybe GI Joe was cross dressing a bit with some of Barbie's frocks.
You're unpacking a fair bit here.
And it was fun. It was just, fun games that you played. And then Barbie would put on GI Joe's camouflage gear, and we'd just mix things up a little bit. It was just am I sharing too
So,
much?
so Barbie would put on GI Joe's camo
Yes,
gear.
yeah, a bit Demi Moore-ish, from
Not Kaylee. It was Barbie, wasn't it?
it was Barbie.
Yeah.
Definitely,
No. I
yes,
knew she was whispering
definitely.
something to you about that. I remember as a kid, and I've got to say, look, in the spirit of acceptance and equality, I didn't have a Barbie,
Hmm.
but I did get given like they were man dolls back in the day. It wasn't a GI Joe, but it was something called Captain Action, and it was an action figure thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
then you could change his clothes into Superman. But the premise was the same, wasn't it? Like,
Yeah,
you,
exactly the same.
you had someone there and you took them on adventures, or, I'm glad Captain Action and G.I. Joe didn't compare notes, because obviously they would have fought over Barbie. But
Well, of course they may have fought over Ken. I mean, that was the kind of, you've got to be inclusive these days.
I know. So,
Did you ever hear about a Chrissy doll?
no.
A Chrissy doll. I had a Chrissy doll, and every girl, a 10-year-old girl, wanted a Chrissy doll. So it was a probably about a foot high, maybe 2 foot high doll, and she had this long hair. But you could push a button on her back, and her hair would retract into her head, and she'd go from short hair to long hair.
Wow.
So she could have a short hairdo, or you could pull the hair out, and it would be long. It was on some sort of a thing inside of the head. And I'd made this stupid decision one day I had her hair in the short position, so it was like shoulder length. Then I got the scissors and cut it off, and then pushed the button, and it all disappeared inside her hair. And all of a sudden she had no hair. But it was, Chrissy dolls were a thing. It was every girl wanted a Chrissy doll, so you could just brush their hair. You know what girls are like with hair.
Well, girls that don't cut your hair. I mean, I'm
Well, that's
surprised
right.
you didn't go into a career in hairdressing after that.
Yeah, oh my goodness. No, I would never have made it.
Oh gosh. What about games like board games? Did you play board games as well as a kid?
Oh, yeah. Before we get to board games, can I just take you back to riding our bikes
Oh yes.
suburbs away?
Yes.
Suburbs away. And you'd be gone all day, and you'd only come home at dinner time. As long as you were home
Yeah.
before dark, right?
Well, I wasn't allowed to have a bike until I was 12. I had a scooter,
Yeah, okay.
That wasn't exactly manly. That didn't really pull the chicks, did it? But
Couldn't go the driving on the scooter there, our guy.
no, nowhere to hang the speaker.
No.
But yeah, but even so, you would just, and not like today where you needed to photograph yourself every minute of every day to
Yeah.
show people. You wanted to find an escape, didn't you?
We would go literally suburbs away, and we didn't have helmets. They weren't a thing. Now, that's not a good thing. Can I preface that by saying that, you absolutely, helmets are life-saving. And we should have, but they just weren't on our radar at that age. Kids would just go and ride their bikes and go for, packs of kids suburbs away.
Yeah, daredevil sort of stuff too, because then you'd build ramps if you didn't have a racing bike, but if you had a dragster, the 3-speed dragster with the sissy bar and the streamers. I don't know. Did you?
The Melvin Roadster.
Did you have one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was besotted by the girl
it.
next door. I think it was because she had just the coolest dragster.
Oh, yeah. If you had a dragster, you were like next level cool.
Oh, yeah. But you'd build ramps and you'd jump over them or whatever it was, or you'd have your skatey under your arm and you'd go skateboarding as well.
I was never cool enough to go skateboarding. That was a boys' thing. Girls didn't really skateboard when I was young.
Yeah, same girl next door that had the dragster also had a skateboard. So
see?
Yeah, but the Surfer Sam, I don't know if you remember that name. That was the Surfer Sam skateboard, and that was the forerunner to being cool. And then you got all these other, Baines Superflex skateboards and all those sort of things that were, cool when we were sort of, early teens. But you'd go away. It didn't matter where you went, but provided you were back sort of before it was too late.
Yeah.
Because mum or dad couldn't ring you on your mobile.
No, where you were.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
And you usually came back because you were either hungry or,
Yep. Or it's getting dark.
Or it's just getting dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 100%.
Okay, so
absolutely.
Let's bring it inside now. Let's bring it into the board games. Obviously, probably the biggest is Monopoly. When Monopoly sort of came into the world, I think in the 70s when it first really appeared in Australia, it was the game. Everyone had to have a Monopoly game.
Did you have a favourite piece on the board? Did you have to be a favourite?
The dog.
You too?
Yeah, I loved the dog, but my sister always wanted the dog, and I always got relegated the boot.
Oh, no. I had to have the dog. I had to have the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The dog or the car, they were good, weren't they? Well, no one wanted to be the thimble.
No. No. I thought the boot was pretty close to the bottom, but you're right, the thimble. I'd forgotten about the thimble. Yeah.
It was a fun game.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And if you wanted to be the banker, I don't know. I never liked being the banker, but I just like to get those Park Lane and what was the other Mayfair. Yeah, just had to get that.
Park Lane and Mayfair. No one wanted Old Kent.
No, Euston Street and Old Kent and whatever they were.
Old Kent. I never understood the whole thing with the railway stations. If you got 4 of those, you got so much more rent. Or when it started getting into buying houses and hotels, I was really lost with that kind of stuff because I think I was just too young to understand how that worked.
I loved me a Monopoly game, and I thought, I could play that all day back in the day. But then there was the others, like there was Battleship. Did you ever, as a girl, play Battleship?
No, I obviously knew of Battleship because all the boys played it all the time. But no, I never got into Battleship.
Yeah, that was one that
it was a bit of a boy thing.
Yeah, I really liked it, and things like a mate around the corner up the road. He had really cool games like Cluedo and Masterpiece and all those sort of.
Masterpiece. Was it Masterpiece?
There was two.
Mastermind?
There was Mastermind and Masterpiece was like all those games about paintings and things like that. But the Mastermind one I remember as well.
That was a lot of fun. And I had one of my earliest games I had was Kerplunk. Do you remember the premise? So Kerplunk was like a clear plastic tube with all these holes in the side, and you'd put all these sticks through all the holes, and it would basically form a bed inside the tube, and then you'd put the balls on top, and the idea was to slowly pull out the sticks without dropping a ball to the bottom. It was pretty pointless, but God, we played it for hours.
It was sort of it was a forerunner to a couple of games, but it was similar in nature, wasn't it? When you had like pickup sticks.
Yes, very similar to pickup sticks.
Can you still buy those? Because it was the black one. What was the thing with there was a black one, wasn't it? Because all different colours. You had to move the sticks, and you weren't allowed to. How did it work again?
I can't remember.
Oh,
But I'm sure you could buy it online somewhere. It'd be available to play pickup sticks.
yeah.
We should do that one day. That'd be a lot of fun.
Someone will remind us on the Facebook page. If you
Yeah,
haven't
exactly.
visited us yet, go to the Big 60. We're on
Yeah,
Facebook.
please tell us the point of that. And what
Yeah.
was the point of Mousetrap?
Oh, I just used to watch.
Like, how did you win at Mousetrap? The ball would just go down through all this obstacle course, get down the bottom, and then the net would fall over the top of the mouse, and you go
Yeah,
Mousetrap.
I remember the ads, and I always wanted one, and I was never lucky enough. But the kids that had it said it used to take longer to set up than it was to actually play.
That's what I was going to say. It took longer to set up
Yeah,
than it did to actually play. There was really no point to
yeah.
that.
You're talking about your Matchbox cars and under the house.
Mm.
I had the cheap man's version of something, but there used to be Scalextrics and all those sort of racing, with the remote
Yeah.
controls. And
Yeah.
if you had a mate that had one of those, how much fun was
Oh, yeah. They were
Oh,
next
that was
level, weren't
next
they?
level. I had I had the poor man's version. I think it was called something motorific, racerific, or something. And yeah, it was fun. I was fortunate enough to get it. It's one of those sort of things. But if someone had a
Yeah.
Scalextrics, or yeah, how good
Oh,
was that?
yeah. They were the rich
AFX
kids.
or something. It was great.
They were the kids that had the pool as well.
Oh, well, we had the dry clad. We had the above ground aluminium one that sort of
Oh, did you have one of
yeah.
those? Like the Clark rubber pool or
Yeah,
whatever it was?
Dad would
Yeah.
get
Yeah,
out the
yeah, yeah.
aluminium sort of
Wow.
siding and then put the liner in, and it was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. But you just walk round and round in circles because that was about Then you'd
Yeah.
get out.
We had a
Oh,
sprinkler. That was all we had was the sprinkler. You just run through the sprinkler and try and avoid the bindi
oh
patch.
yes, the sprinkler run up and down. How good was that? But going back to the games, I mean, we had
Yeah.
things like there was Trouble, which was like this little pop-o-matic dice in the middle, and you used to move around the outside. And
Yeah.
then there were things like just your old school games like Chinese checkers. Did you ever get into that?
Yeah, I did get into Chinese checkers. Definitely got into that. I remember that well. Chinese checkers and snakes and ladders was another favorite. I love snakes and ladders.
Oh, these are all games. I like. It's a shame that at some stage something happened where all those sort of things went out the window, and I guess
Mm.
technology and sort of what the newest, brightest sort of flower was in the garden. But then there were things that were just that you do on your holidays, like going to play like the pinnies, or
Oh my gosh. And I know you and I have spoken about this before. The going up to the comic shop and getting comics. And, I remember we'd go to the Gold Coast for our holidays to see my grandparents, and my parents wouldn't let us go down to the beach in the hottest part of the day. So between, 12 and 2 or whatever. I said, well, can I? She said, well, you go and have a sleep. And of course, you don't want to sleep. She'd say, well, you don't have to sleep, but you have to go and lie down, But she'd let me go and get a Richie Rich comic,
wow,
and I'd come back and lie there, and I loved it. And as soon as you finish, you could go back and swap it for another one. You didn't have
yeah.
to buy them. You could, like a library, you could swap over the comics. And I'd get lost in those comics for hours.
Yeah, it was so good. And this will sound strange, but in my professional career, comics became something that actually was meaningful because I found out much later that your recognition of color and the way you can mix colors and all those sort of things was very relevant in comics, apparently. And I had
Yeah,
this
wow.
lecturer that said, look, when you're learning how you use colors, one of the best things you can look at is a comic book, because the way that they sort of drag kids in through the use of color in those things was way before its time. I thought,
Yeah.
wow,
And the telling of a story.
yeah, look, who knew? Who knew,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Whether it was
exactly.
Scrooge McDuck or Richie Rich or whoever it
Oh, I
was,
loved it. Yeah.
just getting a comic and and I don't know if you remember, but a lot of those comics too had those ads where you could buy things, online,
Yeah.
whether it's a Seven Seas stamp company or a submarine, or you can dress up, or
That's right.
the exploding golf ball, or the soap that made your face black, or X-ray
Is this like
goggles.
Acme stuff again?
Oh, those X-ray glasses that
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Oh, wow. Didn't I want a pair of those? Because I thought,
Oh,
oh,
I
you can
bet.
see through everything. But,
Yeah,
it was always disappointment if you actually ever ordered something from those comic books and it would come
yeah.
to your house and you think, right, that
Oh,
submarine it's a cardboard thing.
yeah,
Oh,
it's right.
right.
It's not a real one. Going back to pinball machines, and when we sort of got to that age, I guess around 13, 14, 15, I don't know, when we were sort of would stick our head in a pinball arcade where all the cool kids were.
Mm.
And the only two pinball machines I remember are the Kiss one, the band Kiss on them,
Mm.
and also there was a Playboy one, which I thought was
Oh.
really naughty. But just the noise that they used to make, and the flippers when they would flick and hit the ball, and you'd
Yeah.
get right into the whole movement of it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I know we talked about this a little while ago. And yes, I went and bought one as a midlife
I know,
crisis.
I have so much more respect for you now.
Oh, geez, you set the
You
bar
bought a
low, and
pinball machine. My gosh.
and it was so much fun. You just relived those teenage years, and it had to be,
Yeah.
as I said, to you, it had to be a electromechanical one where the reels would go around. You hear
Go,
the
yeah, yeah,
ching ching
yeah.
ching ching ching
Ching,
ching
ching,
ching
ching,
ching ching,
ching. Yeah.
and it just had the
Yeah.
feel and the sound and the smell
Yeah.
and the vibe, and it was. I had it for it must have been like 15, 20 years, and it was not often would your grown up mates just come around to your house because it was a barbecue. They wanted to come around to play the
Play the
pennies.
penny, which I
Yeah,
think probably most modern poker machines are based on that sound, aren't they? That winning sound that you would
yeah,
hear. Yeah.
yeah, 100%.
And then moving into the digital age, probably the first digital game that I remember is pub pong or pong,
Yep,
when it was just two little white lines either side of the screen and a ball going
yeah,
across, and it would gradually get faster and faster. And that was the first, I guess, digital game, or that we ever really knew.
yeah. Was that like Atari? And you'd
Yeah.
plug it into the TV, and
Yes.
and
Yeah. Ding ding, and that's all it did. Yeah.
how advanced was that?
Yeah. Well,
When
it
when
was until Space Invaders came along.
oh yeah,
That was the coolest game, I think, when I was about 15, was Space Invaders. And
Space
dun dun
Invaders.
dun 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 dun. And there was
Well,
actually a song in the charts about it.
yeah, it was actually a band called Player One
That's right.
that
That's
had that
right.
song. And
Yeah.
strangely enough, as much as we thought, the only place it really charted was Australia.
Really?
Yeah, that's another episode altogether,
Oh, we're
though,
going
I'm
to do that
sure.
another
But
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
whether it was Pac-Man
I
or
loved
Space Invaders.
Pac-Man.
Oh, you're a
Yeah.
Pac-Man girl.
I love Pac-Man. That was fantastic. And if you were, and this is another boy thing, right? Some of your friends who were boys in the neighborhood had soccer tables.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that wasn't really a girl thing, and I didn't really play them very often, didn't really know how they worked. Did you ever get into soccer tables or those sorts of things?
A kid across the road had one,
Yep.
and like he was a soccer nut. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, he had one of those tables, and it was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
I didn't really get it. It was fun because you were playing with the kid across the road,
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
and that was the thing. I was more you sort of like if I was playing, I wanted to play outside. I wanted to play sports, all those sort of things, which, boys,
You're an
girls.
outside
I was an
kid.
outside kid. But there was a game when it came to cricket called Test Match. And
Oh, that was legendary. I never played it, but I knew the boys loved Test
yeah,
Match.
look,
Yeah.
it was, you'd in the days of 8 ball over, and you'd bowl the googly. And as soon as you got the googly, you knew you were going to get out, But it is a legendary game, and,
Yeah. Great Aussie
oh
game.
yeah, look, I had a really good friend that he came from the bush, and he won't mind me telling you this story, but his favourite game was a game called Squatter. When you talk about a good Aussie game,
Oh, Squatter.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Another great Aussie
yeah.
game about sheep stations and
That's
stuff.
it, And when people say, "Oh, we're not playing for sheep stations," well, with that game, you actually were.
You were. That's right.
So there was just so many games,
Oh.
but so many things to keep you occupied other than a phone or other than social media, right?
Yeah, and we won't even get into things like silkworms and cicadas that the boys used to
Oh,
chase the girls around with cicadas in their hand. I was terrified of them.
Black princes and brown bakers and
Yeah.
green grocers and
Yeah,
all those
that
sort of
stuff.
things.
Oh
The
my
kids
gosh.
actually go and pick up cicadas anymore, or
Yeah,
not?
I didn't. I did. I think I was 30 before I realised that they don't actually bite. So I spent the first 30 years of my life terrified the boys would run around after you with one, try and put it on you. And I thought it was going to bite me. And it wasn't until years later I realised, hang on a minute, they don't bite.
When you think back, and whether it was pick up sticks or kerplunk or mousetrap or tag, there was just so much to do, so much we
Wasn't it
made up.
wonderful?
Oh,
Yeah.
how much?
But there were still times we were bored.
Oh
Should
yeah.
we touch on Spin the Bottle?
You've raised it now.
We have to go there.
All right,
I
go there.
know.
Go there.
Okay, so we played it with I think I would have been about 12, and me and some of the neighborhood kids, including some of the boys, were all sitting in a circle in the garage where the grown-ups wouldn't find us, and we decided to play Spin the Bottle, and it landed on this one kid that I was never going to kiss. And I just went, and his face lit up when the bottle landed on him. And I said, oh, no, I'm sorry. Because I was 11 or 12, and I was like, no, I never kissed a boy before in my life. And I wasn't going to kiss him. And I look back now and I feel really bad.
I haven't got over that. You know that, don't you?
Oh. Did you ever play it?
I did, and I remember it. Like, it was the girl across the road had a party, and I was just innocent. This was my first party that I'd sort of gone to where it wasn't, fairy bread and whatever.
Yeah.
And I think I was probably 12, not quite the fairy bread stakes, but I went there and I thought, and they said, we're going to play spin the bottle. I had no idea
what it was.
Absolutely no idea. And I'm sitting there once again in the garage. Yep. The lights were off.
Yep,
and whatever.
Absolutely.
And they spun the bottle and it sort of went to some girl, and I won't say her name, but I do remember.
You married her? Yep.
No, I didn't. but and then and I thought, okay, well what happens? And then it landed on me, and I thought, right, what's next? And then I found out, and I thought,
this girl come and kiss you?
I'd never kissed this girl. Oh. Well, not this girl, but any girl before. Yeah. And I thought, she's an experienced woman. She might have been 13. I don't know. But then I found out what spin the bottle was.
Right. You actually did kiss someone, so you all went further than I did.
There was a bit of peer pressure going on.
There's so much peer pressure with spin the bottle.
Oh, yeah. So, I learned very quickly and awkwardly what spin the bottle was all about.
Yeah.
But
we learned everything about life in the playground and in the garage. Or at those parties.
Well, speaking of life, I think we've probably got a little bit of living to do, haven't we? And we've got places to go, and I don't know.
And I think we should stop here before we get any further.
We're going to get into real trouble, aren't we?
We will.
All right. Well, hey, listen, I'll go, you go, and we might catch up again later. Okay. See you later.
Cheers. Bye.
And before we go, let's give credit where credit is due. Kaylee Harris and I came up with all the genius content for this week's episode. Our producer, Nick Abood, well, he keeps the lights on and makes sure we don't accidentally upload a cat video instead of a podcast. So thanks for keeping us on track, Nick. Nick?